buenos días. William Cabrera with Lincoln Commercial Group, here con la señorita Nuria Perez Herrera. She is an intern from the local university, Nova Southeastern University. She came on board as the operations assistant with plans to help me grow this business nationally and become the operations manager for the company. Hi, Nuria. Good morning.
Hi, Will. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be a part of Lincoln Commercial Group.
I'm happy to have you. Thank you for being here as well, Nuria. So she is going to be asking me a number of questions regarding the differences between commercial real estate and residential real estate. All part of the learning path that we all need to take in order to get a solid understanding of real estate in general.
Okay, William, I think as a real estate student, I have a lot of questions as many students have. So yeah, let's get started with this.
Okay, excellent. Tell me, what kind of questions do the real estate students at NSU have?
Well, first of all, I know that you have been in both worlds of real estate in commercial and residential. So I would love to know what are the main differences between commercial and residential real estate.
It's a good question to start with. Absolutely. So commercial is typically for business purposes. You'll find single tenant retails like your Burger Kings, your Taco Bells, your Wendy's, McDonald's. You'll have your multi-tenant retail where you'll find your mom and pop hair salons, also the national hair salons, the major anchor tenants like Publix and Winn-Dixie. You can have office buildings, industrial parks, warehouses. And then for residential, those are, for living purposes. You'll have single family residential, whether they're attached or detached. You'll have condos, you'll have townhouses, you'll have villas. So it's residential's for housing and commercial's more for business purposes.
Yeah, and about that, what are the differences between condos and apartments?
It's another great question. So condos are individually owned. Apartments would have one owner. Let me elaborate a little bit further because that can be confusing all on its own. So you have one roof with 100 condos underneath it. You would have 100 individual owners for each one of those units, with an association that helps manage all of them as well, keep all those individual owners in place. With an apartment building, you would have one roof with 100 apartments under it, but only one owner for the entire property.
Okay.
In some greater detail, an apartment building would have one folio ID, one tax ID, one parcel ID, all in the same. Condo building would have multiple tax IDs, parcel IDs, folio IDs, one for each of the condo units.
Okay. And differences between multifamily in real estate?
I think I know what you mean. You're trying to get to the differences between
Multifamily in residential and multifamily in commercial.
It's a common misconception people don't really understand sometimes.
Yeah.
A duplex, a triplex, a fourplex is multifamily, but it's not commercial. This is a residential multifamily property, duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes. Commercial multifamily starts at 5 apartments under one property ID, one folio, or greater.
Mm-hmm.
So 5 units and up is commercial, 2, 3, and 4 units is residential.
Okay. I'm getting it.
Okay.
So how do location considerations vary between residential and commercial?
Well, where do you typically find commercial properties? Businesses. The Taco Bells, McDonald's, Wendy's that I brought up.
Yeah, like on main streets.
On main roads, right?
Yeah.
On the corner of Main and Main, right? So commercial properties are typically on the major arterial corridors within cities, counties, where residential properties would be within the inner streets, inside the neighborhoods, off the corridors, off the arterial paths.
Can you tell me how is property value dictated in commercial versus residential real estate?
One of my favorite things to talk about. So in residential real estate, you are essentially at the mercy of the closed comparable neighbor. If you're selling a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, 1,500 square foot house built in 1980, and your neighbor just closed and it's a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, 1,500 square foot house built in 1980, that's the value of your house. That's what the appraiser is going to tell you your house is worth, and that's what the appraiser is going to tell the bank your house is worth. With commercial, they'll take the comparables approach. But just like anything else, the value of it is what's what someone is willing to pay for it. And someone is willing to pay for it depends on what they're getting in return. So you can drive the property value upward on an income-producing commercial property through its income. The greater the income you can produce from that property, the greater value, the greater price you can generate from that property. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's all the things are getting together, so I can understand a little bit better.
With commercial, you take a comparables approach, but you also take an income approach.
Yeah.
You're looking at the income to come to a property value. In residential, you're really just looking at the comparables approach.
So yeah, talking about a little bit more in purchasing and financing, how is it different? What are the differences between buying commercial properties and buying residential properties when it comes to financing?
Great question. It's a lot of fun to talk about this. So a fourplex, for example, since it falls on the residential, you can qualify under FHA. FHA does not stand for First Time Housing Assistance. It stands for Federal Housing Administration. There's a lot of different programs that fall under FHA. But for an owner-occupant looking to buy a fourplex to live inside one of the units, the lender is going to take into consideration the income of the fourplex plus the income of the individual buying the fourplex. So it helps the debt-to-income ratio.
Okay.
Hopefully I'm not going too far into detail.
No, you're going perfect.
But if you were just buying a single-family home, it's still residential, but the only income that has any weight there is your personal income.
Okay.
So it becomes much more difficult to buy a non-income producing property by yourself.
Yeah,
right?
so it's better.
In commercial, you can't qualify for FHA. You can't be an owner-occupant if you're financing. If you're buying cash, then there isn't a lender that's going to regulate any of it. But if you're getting financing on a commercial purchase, there's a very strong chance that you're going to have to sign a non-owner occupant affidavit if it's if it's a multifamily building. If you're buying for a different use, it's not an apartment building, you could go SBA as an owner occupant for sure. But you typically get into a commercial property, whether it be multifamily or not, with 20% down, and the weight of the income that the property produces is what the bank gauges their viability on, much more than what the income you bring to the table, or much more than the income that you bring to the table.
Yeah, so you're saying like basically all depends on the bank?
Well, it all depends on the income produced by the building.
Okay.
There's a debt service coverage ratio, typically a 1.2 minimum requirement by the bank. So the net operating income, the gross income minus all the expenses of the building, has to meet 100% of the annual mortgage amount plus 20% left over. That's a minimum 1.2 debt service coverage ratio requirement by the bank. So I know that was kind of a long-winded answer. Let me try to circle back and make it a little bit tighter. When you're purchasing a residential property that's non-income producing, all the weight falls on you as the borrower. Can you afford the mortgage on this property or not? When you're buying a commercial property that's income producing, that's not going to be for you to occupy, the weight falls on the building's ability to hold the mortgage, to sustain the debt service, which would be the principal and interest.
Okay. What about investors? How do investors typically differ in commercial versus residential?
How do they differ in commercial versus residential? So in commercial, I mean, there's emotional attachment to investments. Any which way you look at it, you are emotionally attached. I mean, it's people say, it's not personal, it's business. Come on, business is personal. We buy real estate because it's personal to us. Uh, but in commercial, we're emotionally attached to the financials. We're emotionally attached to the percentage gain
To the
on the money that we're putting
numbers.
down. We're emotionally attached to the numbers. What's in it for me financially?
Mm-hmm.
On the residential side, it's more so, is the kitchen big enough for my liking? Are the cabinets the color that I like? Are the closets big enough? It's a little bit different. It's the investors aren't thinking so much about cash flow for residential. They're thinking more so long-term equity growth because it's proximity to the ocean perhaps, or the size of the kitchen, like I mentioned, or the size of the land. Those things aren't necessarily that important to a commercial investor unless they're thinking about how much income they can rent. They can collect from the particular property that they're purchasing.
So it is more efficient to own commercial for the investors, or you will say like residential.
So I specialize in multifamily buildings. I like to keep it to multifamily. So when we talk about efficiencies in property ownership, let's think about 100 single family homes versus one apartment building that has 100 apartments under one roof. If you have 100 houses, even if they're all in the same neighborhood, all within walking distance,
Mm-hmm.
that's still 100 roofs, 100 different lawns to mow, 100 different pools to maintain if they all have pools. It's 100 different property structures. When you're buying them, that's 100 different closings, 100 different property inspections. That's 100 different insurance premiums, property taxes, 100. I mean,
Yeah, it's a lot.
it's a lot.
Yeah.
I'd rather have one building, one property tax, one property insurance, and one location to manage,
Yeah,
one lawn to mow, one pool to maintain.
it sounds better.
In my opinion, it's much greater efficiencies. I mean, there's an
Mhm.
ass for every chair, so it depends. People look at things a little bit differently.
Mhm.
I would much rather prefer 100 apartment units under one roof opposed to 100 different roofs.
Yeah, so about agents' life, what do you think about that? Like, what are you have been in both sides, so I would love to know the daily responsibilities for an agent that it's only commercial and for an agent that it's only residential.
So being on both sides, I didn't really work much as an agent on the residential side. I tried it a couple times and it just wasn't my cup
Yeah.
of soup. It just was not for me. There was something about the complaints about, I don't like where this column is situated. I don't like the size of the kitchen. I don't like the size of the bathroom and the color of the cabinets. It was something that really just irked me,
It wasn't for you.
it just wasn't
Yeah.
for me. And then when I got into commercial, it's like, okay, this makes sense. This I can make sense of these numbers. I can work with this. Anyway, typical day of the life that I can think of, that I can relate to when it comes to residential. I mean, you'll do some work during some business hours. You'll do some prep work like property research, and try to schedule some showings on Show Assist and Showing Time if you're on the MLS. Typically for later in the afternoon. Most of the clients that you're representing, these people are working typical, 8 to 5 jobs, 9 to 5 jobs, so they're not really able to break free to
Mhm.
talk to you and look at different properties online or even go visit these properties and tour them. So you're meeting with them after 5 o'clock, typically Monday through Friday, 5:30, 6 o'clock at night. You're scheduling different showings to go tour these properties with your prospective buyers if you're not representing a seller. Same thing on weekends. If you're representing a seller, now you're working Saturdays and Sundays, hosting open houses, trying to get these things sold. If you're representing buyers, you're taking them to open houses or you're taking them to other showings that you've scheduled for the weekend because those properties weren't available to schedule showings during the week. With commercial, man, the clients that you're working with are in the same business that you're in. They're just not necessarily brokering their own deals. So they're working, 6 a.m. to 6 o'clock at night, managing their buildings, looking at other buildings to purchase for their portfolios, looking at their portfolios in general. Which one do I need to sell? What do I need to reposition through a 1031 exchange? That's their job. That's their livelihood. It's what they do Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. So it's basically your own schedule too. Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. Weekends are basically up for you to do whatever you'd like in commercial. I mean, I typically spend my weekends working if I'm not with my son.
Yeah.
But you can essentially make your own schedule, whether it's residential or commercial. Typical work schedule in commercial is Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. Typical work schedule in residential is a couple hours during Monday through Friday, and the rest at night and on the weekends.
Mostly on the nights, like maybe after 5.
Sure. And on the weekends.
Weekends for open houses.
Open houses and showing buyers.
Yeah.
Other houses.
So, about clients, how does the process of finding clients differ between commercial and residential real estate?
In residential, you can find your prospects, you can find your clients purchasing lists online. There's a lot of prospective buyers searching for their future homes on Zillow, on Redfin, on Trulia, on all these different online portals. They can go in and do different searches for neighborhoods, property types, years of construction, all of that. As a residential agent, you can go into these different online websites or all these different websites and essentially purchase lists from them. You can purchase different marketing packages for them to receive leads that you can call on that are actively searching for properties to buy, or even actively searching for listing agents to come and give them comparable market analyses on their properties for them to list them for sale. In commercial, it's not necessarily like that. The commercial world is much more hush hush, much more under the table. They don't really. I mean, there's online portals like LoopNet, like Crexy, like I think it's called apartmentbuildings.com or multifamily.com. I forget what it is at the moment.
I think it's apartments.
But that's for rentals, apartments.com.
Yeah.
But there's another one. I forget what it's called at the moment. There's a couple of online portals, but typically when you find these buildings listed for sale on the market, it's the ones that investors don't really want. They're overpriced. There's some hair on the deal, meaning that they have maybe structural issues, or maybe there's some title issues, or maybe there's some really problematic tenants, or maybe there's some red flags there, and investors don't want those buildings. That's typically why they end up listed for sale on the market. If you're doing your research and you're becoming a market expert, you're building a database in commercial.
Yeah.
You've gone into CoStar, for example. You've incurred some costs. You've had to sign a contract, and you're able to go in there and you can now research specific properties in a specific neighborhood and find the ownership information on these properties. You start building relationships with these particular property owners, and as you're building relationships, and they need to start transacting, maybe because their depreciation was exhausted, or maybe because it's time for them to buy another building that they need to add to their portfolio, whatever the case might be. They're ready to transact. And if you've been building a relationship with them, they're going to be transacting with you or through you. Mm-hmm. You now have the relationships with somebody who wants to sell their building and somebody who wants to buy their building. So you transact on buildings that never even make the market. So that's how you find your clients. Boots on the ground in commercial real estate. Doing the property research, making the phone calls to the property owners, and building relationships with them.
Yeah. So I think this is one of my last questions for you, but how do commissions? That's one of the most important parts.
Commissions, huh?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, like how do commissions structures differ for agents in the commercial real estate?
It's funny you say that it's one of the most important parts, because I tell my agents we have to completely detach ourselves from a commission. We have to detach ourselves from a monetary outcome. We're not here to close deals. We're here to build relationships. Mm-hmm. Whether we make a commission from it or not is later. You know, I grew up playing baseball, and the term is, you don't swing for the fences, you swing for the base hit. Let's just get on base. Let's get on base. So I'm trying to build a relationship with everyone. And when it's time to transact, we transact, and we all make money. But anyway, there's actually a big difference in commission structures or commission amounts, commission percentages between residential and commercial. Typical house price, typical house value, I'm not exactly sure what the average is in, Dade County, Broward County, Palm Beach County, but, you throw a stone and you can hit $1 million house for sure. So $1 million house, even at a 6% commission, and these days it's kind of, not necessarily the norm, but that's only $60,000 commission. We can find a $10 million apartment building also by throwing a stone. That's not going to come with a 6-point fee.
Of course.
That's going to be more like a 2% fee. So somebody might say, 6% for a house. I'd rather work 6% for a house. Why? 2% of 10 million is $200,000. 6% of $1 million is $60,000. And guess what? It takes roughly about 6 months to sell a residential $1 million house. It takes about 6 months to sell a commercial $10 million building.
Yeah, the time
So why would I work 6 months for 60 grand when I can work 6 months for 200 grand? So the commissions are a different story, and so is the deal structure altogether. The conversations are completely different. The financial analyses are completely different. The valuations are completely different.
Well, that was so amazing. That was all of the questions that I have for you.
Muchísimas gracias, Nuria.
Gracias por tenerme aquí, de verdad.
Gusto en haberte tenido. Look forward to doing it with you again. This is all about preserving capital and increasing wealth through the ownership and exchange of income-producing commercial real estate. Our conversations are going to be revolved around that, supporting single dads, supporting young, ambitious entrepreneurs that want to get into the commercial real estate world and learn as much about the business as possible. Everything I can do to help and support, I am all about that game. Single dads, mentorship programs, commercial real estate, income-producing properties, preserving capital and increasing wealth, Lincoln Commercial Group. Love having you, Nuria. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to our podcast, Preserving Capital and Increasing Wealth. Please visit our website, lincolncommercialgroup.com. Please follow us on all social media platforms. This is your host, William Cabrera, saying goodbye, God bless, all the best wishes in the world.